Hi, it's Gemma, and we're headed to the Tainted Mountain Temple. I thought I'd start here because the pawns start talking almost as soon as you get there, and I kept getting interrupted. So I want to transport from Grand Soren to the Tainted Mountain Temple where we can talk about what's going on there in the lore and world of Dragon's Dogma. So we're headed to Barda Crags, which is where the Great Wall is. And the pawns are going to start talking right away. And I know this takes up time to transport
The
there,
Great
but
Wall. It was built to keep all manner of beasts from Grances.
it doesn't matter where you plant that thing. All right, we're here during the day, so once again we have a guard outside. We're looking at wooden palisades that the Duke has hastily erected to try to keep monsters from, without, on one side of the wall, from attacking the wall, because that's obvious from the way those um, wood stakes are pointed. And we also know that it's temporary because that looks like fresh wood. So he's hastily erected those. He
It's a
has
grander
also,
structure than the other holds we've seen.
the pawns comment on how much grander it is than anything else we've been to. And you can also see wooden scaffolding all around as the Duke is attempting to shore up his defenses now that the dragon has come. And it
The fortress
is
is meant to protect Grances from the dragon. It does look very solid.
And when Barahur says it, it always cracks me up because she's convinced it does look very solid. When Kate and Shadow say it, they always have a question mark in their tone about it does look very solid, but it is
Tis a
quite
heavy
thick.
onus the men here bear.
And they're referring to the fact that the men who are defending this are the first line of defense of whatever is going to come over those mountains. So let's go inside. Again, this is quite medieval, in late medieval, almost Renaissance-like, in the fact that you've got the crenellations. It's quite thick. It's obvious that whoever built it knew what they were doing. All these aren't just rocks piled on top of rocks, but actually stone blocks with corner stones built into them to keep these um, structures from collapsing, these towers. You can also see cranes that are probably being used by the Duke's stonemasons to reinforce any places that have fallen. You can see them on both sides there. You can see arrow slits built into them so that whatever comes in here can be trapped between the two portcullises and then just taken out by archers planted on the walls above. Um, and let's continue on. Several lines of defense here. Still more wooden posts built in. Um, And a lot of times those would have, not so much these scaffolding structures, but a lot of times those built into the towers there would have been places where banners would have hung, those sorts of things. Also built to ease some of the strain from the heavier structures above it as well. I'm not an architect, so I don't know a whole lot about those sorts of things.
The
See what the
once
pawns.
proud hold lies ruined.
So the once proud hold lies ruined. We've got flagstone on the floor, quite well worn by many people's feet, booted and probably hobnailed feet.
Such a
Like
grand keep fell in a moment's time before the worm. Truly a terrible beast.
so, I always find that interesting. Such a grand keep fell in a moment's, you know, um, sort of blow before the worm. So the worm, terrible beast, but it fell before that. See, it's quite thick, quite well built, quite well reinforced, and we're
Ready,
always
sir.
going downward.
Let us be off!
The passageways become narrow, you twist, you turn. I think that's meant on purpose. You can even see it on the map because this would force any kind of mob of any sort, like goblins, for example, that always seem to accompany the worm squeezing into a tight, from sort of a horde into a tight, narrow column that could, with blind twists and turns, and so they could be, things could be dropped on them from above, or they're then fed piecemeal into a larger area where they could just be shot at, and taken out in piecemeal before they could ever form any kind of rank or formation. And again, I'm not a tactician either. And it always says leave rather than enter. So, and now we're in the Tainted Mounted Temple. So we've climbed down that ladder. We've come in through this gated area. It's meant as a defense, so something coming in that's coming up that way, well, you'd have to try to break through these gates to get up through it. There's obviously an area back here where there's looks like building construction. We can see we're deep into the heart of the mountain, and let's continue on. These are quite crude structures, but still some trees kind of grow here. They're obviously burnt, and they've like kind of formed out of the mountain. Their roots go deep, but they're all burnt. That's where actually, that's a famous rock right there. We see Grigori there. We don't know who he is at the very beginning of the game. A dragon that beckons Savan onward. And then one of the most interesting things that I've noted, and it could just be because I know a bit about astronomy, and that is right here. There's a Hercules-like figure. He's holding, it looks like a shield and possibly a weapon in the other hand, but actually when you see him in the night sky, he's got a keystone for his body, and in one hand he's always holding up a, um, a bear skin or a lion skin, and then in the other he's got a club. It could be Orion, who has the similar type of shape, only not a keystone, and he is also holding up, like he holds up a shield and a it just depends on who draws him from the figures in the sky. A lot of times he's shown holding, an arrow, or I mean a bow, and a club. So very definitely that is probably an Arisen. Some graffiti there. This is rough-hewn walls carved into the heart of the mountain with scaffolding propping it up and more scaffolding. And then we head further down, and if you look below us, you can see there's some sort of carving in there that radiates out from the flooring. Okay, you can see it, what's carved in it. It's hard to see what's really carved in that flooring, but something is definitely carved there. And then if we look here, there's the dragon right there. And he's quite delicately carved, I might add. So make no bones about it, this is where we're going, and there's fire all around that is associated with that. And in fact, if we look here, this is quite old, and you just have to see it from a certain point of view. Is that the same carving? It's, for me, it's really hard to make out, but you can definitely see there's some wings right there, it looks like. Is that the body of the dragon? The same motif that's up there on the wall. Alright, let's continue further in. And again, we go through a passage that's been just rough hewn out of the rock, propped up a bit, and relying on the mountain and the structure of the mountain itself to kind of keep it away, propped up. And then we enter into way older but more delicately carved pillars. And definitely reminds me of Greek and Roman temples. So there's that temple feel. If you look off into the distance, you can see a bridge. Is that the bridge we're going to be crossing? It's hard to know. I like to think so, that that's a bridge we're eventually the bridge you're going to cross when you come to it. So, fire all around. The Tainted Mountain Temple is definitely, you know, that is the motif here. So we have encountered water and ice at the water god's altar, lightning and lightning enchanted creatures at the Blue Moon Tower and air. We have encountered creatures and things associated with dark in the catacombs, the earth gods. Salvation is also, they practice the dark arts and they're down there, and now we're here at the fire. And so we've got that, and the game itself has 5 archmagics. So we have got we have dark, we have holy, we have lightning and lightning enchantments, we have ice, and now here is fire. And now we're moving upward, ever upward, so we've gone down to go up. And one thing I want you to note is this architecture changes quite a lot. We still have the same arches and everything, but if you look, those columns are supported by those blocks right in there, and I'm not sure of the architectural name of them, but they all have a leaf carving in them, quite old and quite worn, so you cannot see the detail, and it's also made out of a different type of rock altogether, different type of stone, so that it's highlighted. So quite dark, you can see almost scorch marks on the rock, and then you can see that delicate carving in that white, almost granite-like rock, limestone, like a white rock. I'm not a geologist either, so I'm guessing at the names. But you definitely get the feeling you're entering a temple. And then there's a couple very interesting things here in the temple and a chamber. So um, you can see this one quite well here because we're here during the day. Let me get away from the chains there. And there it is. It's a figure carved with a winged headpiece, and the armor is almost made out of scales or feathers. I think scales. It Depending on the angle you look at it, it could be a man, it could be a woman. So let's just call it androgynous. They occur in pairs. And when I saw that winged headdress, there was something I thought of almost immediately. Well, first of all, we get something in the game later, the dragon wing circlet, but it's not present in the vanilla side of the game. So I threw that idea out right away, because this had already been done before Bitter Black was coming out. Um, and the other thing I wanted to note was that there are 3 minor deities that I'm aware of that have winged headpieces or wings associated with them. And one is from Norse mythology, and it's the Valkyries. The other is from Greek mythology, and that's Hermes. And the third is from Roman mythology, and it's Mercury. Now, Mercury has wings on his feet, but sometimes those wings are put on his headpiece. Same with Hermes. And Hermes and Mercury are a minor deity that are patrons of travelers and pilgrims. And they also serve as a conduit between the underworld and the overworld. The Valkyries are Norse minor deities. They actually play quite a major role, but um, they fly over the battlefield, and they search for fallen warriors um, that have fallen in battle honorably, and they sort them out from everybody else, and they escort them to Valhalla. So again, they're serving as a conduit between sort of the overworld and the underworld, um, meaning the places of where you would go after you would die. And the same can be said for Hermes and Mercury. He kind of is that kind of a deity, and they are located all over this area. So they seem to occur in pairs. Let's go and look at them from below as well. There are two there. Um, there were the two, one above me and one on this side as well. I'm kind of underneath them so you can't see. And then of course those two. And as we proceed further into the temple, which is far more ancient than the Great Wall itself, so quite old but quite delicately carved, we come to the center area, which again has that, it's quite open. There are those two figures again. Very much has the feel of a Greco-Roman temple, or a great cathedral or church, and especially this edifice reminds me of the edifices on, say, many basilica around the world. Um, and it's known that the developers and designers took their inspiration from places that they visited in Europe and Great Britain. So that's my take on the Tainted Mountain Temple. Boy, say that fast. We have fire that's associated here, Grigori or the dragon, and dragons in times past, and we know of one personally, which is the one we encounter as Savan. We also came here and fire everywhere, um, and this is quite an old place, but quite beautiful and quite delicately done, I might add. Um, so it's meant to inspire you with awe. We cannot proceed any further, mostly because I'm post-game and it'll kick me right back into this temple area. So if you like this kind of content, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. If you want to offer your comments or opinions of my opinions, please comment below. This is Gemmalady from the world of Dragon's Dogma. Thanks very much for watching.